What if the monsters of legend were never monsters at all, only misunderstood truths buried beneath time? For thousands of years, humanity has spoken of dragons, giants, sea beasts, and cursed creatures lurking at the edges of the world. We call them myths. But what if ancient people were describing real discoveries, fossils unearthed, animals encountered, and dangers science had not yet named? Tonight, we peel back the veil between legend and history to reveal 10 mythical creatures that actually existed, where bones become stories and fear becomes myth. Thank you for watching, and welcome back to the channel. Let's begin. Dragons, when fossils became fire. Long before science learned how to read stone like a history book, humanity listened to the earth in a different way. When the ground cracked open after floods or earthquakes, enormous bones emerged, jaws lined with teeth like daggers, ribs wider than a man's chest, skulls too large to belong to any known animal. To ancient people, these were not remnants of extinct creatures. They were proof that dragons had once ruled the world. Across ancient China, the word long, dragon, was never a symbol of fantasy. Dragons were believed to be real, physical beings that controlled rain, rivers, and the fertility of the land. For centuries, farmers plowing their fields uncovered massive fossilized bones. These remains were collected, ground into powder, and sold in apothecaries as dragon bones, prescribed for illness, fever, and spiritual imbalance. It wasn't until the early 20th century that Western paleontologists realized these so-called dragon bones were actually dinosaur fossils, including massive sauropods and horned ceratopsians. To the ancient mind, the conclusion was logical. If bones of such size existed, then creatures of terrifying power must have lived before humanity. Dragons were not imagined, they were inferred. In Europe, a similar story unfolded. Medieval monasteries recorded discoveries of enormous bones pulled from cliffs, caves, and riverbanks. Lacking any concept of extinction, scholars believed the world had always held the same creatures. When a bone could not be matched to horse, cow, or man, it had to belong to something monstrous. Dragon lore spread across Britain, Germany, and Scandinavia, each region shaping the beast according to the remains they encountered. One of the most influential discoveries came from elephant and mammoth skulls. These skulls featured a large central cavity where the trunk once attached. To someone unfamiliar with elephants, the whole appeared to be a single massive eye socket. Combined with curved tusks and immense size, these skulls became the foundation for dragon and giant imagery. The earth itself was supplying the raw material for legend. Even wings, perhaps the most fantastical feature of dragons, have a fossil explanation. Across Europe, pterosaur fossils were unearthed long before they were understood. Their elongated wing bones, unlike anything living at the time, suggested flying reptiles of immense size. When fragmented and incomplete, these fossils easily became proof of winged dragons, especially when found near mountains or caves already feared by local populations. Fire-breathing, the dragon's most iconic trait, may also have its roots in reality. Ancient observers noticed that methane gas sometimes seeped from caves and fissures in the ground. When ignited by torches, these vents erupted into flame. A cave filled with bones, strange fumes, and sudden fire would have been interpreted as the lair of a living monster. To enter such a place was to challenge death itself. In the ancient Near East, dragons were associated with chaos and primordial power. The Babylonian dragon Tiamat represented the original chaos from which creation emerged. In the Hebrew Bible, creatures like Leviathan and Behemoth are described in vivid, physical terms: scaled hides, smoking breath, bones like bars of iron. These were not metaphors to ancient audiences, they were descriptions of beings believed to exist at the fringes of the known world. Greek writers such as Herodotus recorded tales of giant serpents in Arabia and Ethiopia. Roman naturalists like Pliny the Elder insisted dragons were real animals that fought elephants and guarded precious treasures. These accounts were not treated as fiction. They were early natural history, filtered through limited knowledge and fear. Dragons also served a psychological role. They explained why certain places were dangerous, why caves collapsed, why mountains were feared, why bones emerged from the earth like reminders of an older, dead world. A dragon marked the boundary between human order and untamed nature. As centuries passed, the image of the dragon evolved. In Europe, dragons became symbols of evil and chaos, enemies of saints and heroes. Saint George did not slay an idea, he slew a creature believed to be real. Killing the dragon symbolized humanity's victory over the unknown. In China, however, dragons remained benevolent, divine, and wise, reflecting a worldview that saw nature as something to be harmonized with rather than conquered. Modern paleontology has stripped dragons of their literal existence, but in doing so, it has confirmed something remarkable. The ancient world was not wrong to believe in monsters. They were simply out of time. Dinosaurs were dragons by another name, massive reptiles that ruled the earth long before humanity walked upright. Pterosaurs were flying dragons. Marine reptiles were sea serpents. The difference between myth and science is not discovery, but explanation. When ancient people found bones too large to comprehend, they did not dismiss them. They built stories around them. They listened. Myth was their language for truth. And even now, when we uncover fossils in remote deserts and mountain ranges, we feel the same or they did. The bones are silent, but the fire they once inspired still burns, proof that dragons were never just fantasy. They were memory, buried in stone, waiting to be named. The Cyclops, the one-eyed giants of Greece. On the wind-scoured islands of the Mediterranean, where volcanic cliffs plunge into blue-black seas, ancient Greeks told stories of giants with a single, terrible eye. The Cyclopes were not merely monsters of bedtime tales, they were woven into the very fabric of Greek identity. Homer described them as towering beings of immense strength, shepherds who lived beyond law and civilization, untouched by agriculture, justice, or the gods' moral order. Most famous among them was Polyphemus, the one-eyed giant who trapped Odysseus and his men in a cave, devouring them one by one beneath a cold, unblinking gaze. To the modern reader, the Cyclops feels like pure fantasy, an imaginative exaggeration meant to embody barbarism and chaos. But for the ancient Greeks, the Cyclops was disturbingly real. The landscape itself seemed to support the legend. Across Sicily, Crete, and other Greek islands, shepherds and travelers occasionally stumbled upon enormous skulls half buried in limestone caves or eroding from hillsides. These skulls were far larger than any humans and unmistakably organic. At their center was a single massive cavity, round, dark, and hollow. To ancient eyes, this was no mystery. It was an eye socket. What these early observers were actually seeing were the fossilized skulls of dwarf elephants, prehistoric relatives of modern elephants that once roamed the Mediterranean islands during the Ice Age. Isolated by rising seas, these elephants evolved smaller bodies, yet retained massive skulls to support trunks and tusks. When the animals went extinct, their remains lay hidden for millennia, waiting to be uncovered by erosion, earthquakes, and human curiosity. The crucial detail lay in the skull's anatomy. The large central hole was not an eye at all, but the nasal cavity where the trunk once attached. To someone unfamiliar with elephants, animals absent from most of ancient Greece, this feature looked exactly like a single, enormous eye socket. The true eye sockets, located on the sides of the skull, were smaller and less obvious, easily overlooked or mistaken for damage. Faced with such evidence, the Greeks did what all humans do when confronted with the unknown: they told stories. The Cyclops became a giant because the skulls were gigantic. He became one-eyed because the skull suggested it. He lived in caves because that was where the bones were found. Myth did not invent the Cyclops, it explained him. This fossil-based origin theory gains even more weight when examined alongside Greek geography. Sicily, home to Mount Etna, was believed to be the forge of the Cyclopes. According to Hesiod, the Cyclopes were master smiths who crafted Zeus's thunderbolts deep beneath the earth. Etna's frequent eruptions, fire, smoke, and thunder roaring from underground, seemed like undeniable proof of giants hammering away in volcanic caverns. To ancient minds, volcanism demanded agency. Mountains did not rage without reason. Something powerful lived below. In this way, natural phenomena, fossil discoveries, and cultural memory fused into a single narrative. The Cyclops was not just a creature, he was an explanation for the world's violence. Yet the Cyclops was more than a misunderstanding of bones and geology. He also represented a psychological boundary. In Greek literature, Cyclopes existed outside civilization. They did not farm, govern, or worship the gods properly. Polyphemus mocks Zeus, eats men raw, and lives by brute strength alone. The one-eyed giant was a warning, a mirror held up to what humans could become without law, culture, or restraint. The single eye itself carried symbolic weight. Two eyes grant depth perception, balance, and judgment. One eye suggests narrow vision, obsession, and lack of perspective. The Cyclops did not see the world fully. He saw only what was directly in front of him: food, territory, dominance. In this sense, the Cyclops was both a physical giant and a moral one-dimensional being. Some scholars suggest that memories of encounters with unusually tall humans may have contributed to the legend as well. While not giants, certain ancient populations suffered from conditions like gigantism, making individuals appear monstrous to neighboring communities. Combined with distorted oral tradition, such encounters could easily grow into tales of towering beings. But the fossil explanation remains the most compelling, because it leaves behind physical evidence. Even today, dwarf elephant skulls can be found in museums across Greece and Italy, their central cavities still evoking the same unsettling impression. When modern viewers see them for the first time, many experience a brief shock. The Cyclops suddenly feels plausible. This realization forces a re-evaluation of ancient intelligence. Too often, modern culture treats mythmakers as naive or superstitious. In truth, they were keen observers working with limited tools. Without evolutionary theory or paleontology, interpreting fossils as remnants of giants was not ignorance, it was logic. The Greeks did not know elephants had trunks. They did not know extinction existed. But they knew bones meant life had once been there. And so they built stories around those bones. The Cyclops endured because the story fit the evidence, the landscape, and the moral lessons Greek society wanted to teach. Myth became memory. Memory became culture. Even today, the Cyclops lingers in our imagination. He appears in films, books, and art as a symbol of primal power and monstrous simplicity. But beneath the fantasy lies a deeper truth. The Cyclops was born from humanity's first attempts at science. The Griffin, guardian of gold. Long before the griffin became a heraldic symbol carved into medieval shields and cathedral stone, it lived at the edge of the known world, where maps faded into deserts and rumors replaced certainty. To the ancient Greeks, the griffin was not a fantasy beast but a deadly reality, a creature spoken of by travelers who had ventured too far east and returned changed, shaken, and wealthier, if they returned at all. The earliest written accounts come from Herodotus and earlier still from the Greek physician Ctesias, who served at the Persian court in the 5th century BCE. They described a creature with the body of a lion and the head and wings of an eagle, nesting in the arid lands beyond Scythia. These beasts, they said, fiercely guarded gold deposits, tearing apart any man foolish enough to approach their territory. The Scythians themselves, nomadic horsemen of the Eurasian steppe, repeated these warnings with reverence and fear. Gold existed in those deserts, but so did death. To a modern reader, this sounds like pure invention. But to ancient audiences, the story had credibility because it came from trade routes, not temples. These were not priestly myths but travelers' reports, stories passed from merchant to merchant along the early Silk Road. Where commerce flows, so does information. And where danger lies, stories sharpen into warnings. The key to the Griffin legend may lie not in imagination, but in bone and stone. In the vast deserts of what is now Mongolia and northern China, paleontologists have uncovered countless fossils of a small but striking dinosaur, Protoceratops. This creature walked on four legs like a lion-sized mammal. It had a parrot-like beak, powerful jaws, and a large bony frill extending from the back of its skull. Its forelimbs were strong, its skeleton compact and imposing. When partially exposed by shifting sands, its fossilized remains bear a startling resemblance to ancient descriptions of griffins. Imagine a Scythian gold prospector riding across the desert thousands of years ago. The wind strips away layers of sand, revealing stone bones locked in death. A beaked skull emerges first. A curved frill suggests wings folded against the body. For powerful limbs grip the earth. No living animal resembles this thing. The conclusion is inevitable: this is a guardian, frozen in time. Even more compelling is the location of these fossils. Protoceratops remains are often found near gold-bearing deposits. The same geological processes that preserved these fossils also concentrated precious metals in the surrounding earth. To ancient miners, gold and monsters were discovered together. One explained the other. The griffin, then, may have functioned as an ancient warning sign, a mythic way to say, this land holds riches, but it will kill the unprepared. The Scythians were master storytellers, but they were also practical people. Their legends were not meant to entertain but to protect territory. By terrifying outsiders with tales of vicious beasts, they discouraged rivals from mining their lands. The griffin became both myth and psychological weapon. Over time, the Greeks absorbed the story and reshaped it. In Greek art, the griffin became more refined, wings outstretched, beak sharpened, posture regal. It evolved from a desert horror into a divine sentinel, often associated with Apollo, god of the sun and knowledge. The beast that once slaughtered gold thieves became a symbol of sacred protection. This transformation reveals something important about myth: it is not static. It evolves as cultures reinterpret fear. What the Scythians saw as danger, the Greeks reframed as order. What began as a fossil in the sand became an emblem of civilization. Yet the fear never fully vanished. Medieval travelers still spoke of griffin-infested lands in Central Asia. Maps marked these regions with creatures instead of borders. The message remained the same across centuries: there are places humans do not belong. Modern science now allows us to reconstruct the real animal behind the legend. Protoceratops lived around 75 million years ago, long before humans. But ancient people did not know about extinction. To them, the earth was timeless. If bones existed, the creature must still exist somewhere, perhaps hiding, perhaps waiting. This explains why griffins were never described as extinct. They were always elsewhere. Beyond the mountains. Past the desert. On the edge of the map. The griffin is one of the clearest examples of how myth bridges ignorance and observation. Ancient people did not invent creatures from nothing. They interpreted physical evidence with the tools they had: memory, fear, and imagination. Fossils became monsters. Landscapes became warnings. Stories became survival strategies. In this sense, the griffin is not a lie, it is a translation. Even today, the image endures. Griffins guard banks, universities, and ancient manuscripts. They still protect treasure, though now the treasure is knowledge. Unknowingly, we continue the tradition begun by nomads staring at bones in the sand. The Kraken, terror beneath the waves. Long before satellites mapped the oceans and sonar pierced the darkness below, the sea was humanity's greatest unknown. To ancient sailors, the horizon marked the edge of the world, and beneath the waves lived things older, larger, and more hostile than anything on land. Among these terrors, none inspired more fear than the Kraken. The Kraken did not stalk forests or mountains, it ruled the abyss. Medieval sailors described it as a colossal sea beast, large enough to be mistaken for an island, capable of dragging entire ships into the deep with its massive limbs. To encounter it was not merely to die, but to vanish, swallowed by the sea without a trace. For centuries, scholars dismissed the Kraken as a nautical nightmare, a product of storm-fueled imagination and superstition. But the ocean, it turns out, was hiding something very real. The earliest written accounts of the Kraken come from Norse and Scandinavian traditions. In the cold waters of the North Atlantic, fishermen spoke of a creature so vast that when it surfaced, the sea level itself seemed to rise. Birds would gather above it, mistaking its back for land, while fish swarmed near the surface, an omen that the monster was feeding below. The Norwegian bishop Erik Pontoppidan, writing in the 18th century, described the Kraken not as myth, but as a biological reality, cataloguing it alongside whales and sea serpents. What made the Kraken unique among sea monsters was not its aggression, but its scale. It was not merely dangerous, it was incomprehensible. For centuries, no animal known to science could match the descriptions. Octopuses and squids were considered small, fragile creatures, incapable of threatening ships. Without evidence, the Kraken faded into the realm of legend. Yet sailors continued to tell stories of tentacles thicker than masts, of ships found drifting with broken hulls and no survivors, of strange circular scars left on floating debris. Then, in the modern era, the ocean began to give up its secrets. In the 19th century, massive carcasses started washing ashore. Enormous, rubbery bodies with long arms and enormous eyes, creatures unlike anything most people had ever seen. These were the remains of giant squids. Some measured over 40 feet in length, with eyes the size of dinner plates, perfectly evolved to detect movement in the lightless depths. For the first time, science was forced to admit something unsettling: enormous cephalopods were real. Giant squids live in the deep ocean, often more than 2,000 feet below the surface, where pressure is crushing and sunlight never reaches. They possess powerful suction cups lined with serrated rings capable of gripping flesh and wood alike. Their beaks, hidden at the center of their limbs, are strong enough to tear through bone. Even more disturbing was what scientists found on whales. Sperm whales, the deepest diving mammals on Earth, were discovered with massive circular scars covering their heads and bodies. These scars matched the size and shape of giant squid suction cups. The implication was clear: deep beneath the waves, battles between titans were taking place, creatures weighing tens of tons locked in violent struggle in total darkness. To ancient sailors, witnessing even a fragment of such a creature would have been overwhelming. A single tentacle breaking the surface during a storm. A shadow moving beneath a ship. A vessel suddenly dragged sideways by unseen force. Without modern understanding, these encounters could only be interpreted as attacks by monsters. The Kraken was not imaginary, it was partial truth magnified by fear. Adding to the terror was the ocean itself. Storms could appear suddenly, waves towering like walls, ships snapping apart without warning. When vessels disappeared, no wreckage often remained. Sailors needed explanations. The Kraken became the embodiment of the sea's cruelty, a living symbol of everything humanity could not control. Some legends describe the Kraken as creating whirlpools, dragging ships downward as it submerged. While exaggerated, this detail may reflect real phenomena. Massive underwater animals moving rapidly, combined with powerful currents and storms, could indeed create dangerous turbulence near the surface, especially for small wooden ships. The Kraken also appears in medieval maps, lurking near the edges of the known world. These illustrations were not meant as decoration, they were warnings. Here be things that will kill you. What makes the Kraken particularly fascinating is how closely its myth aligns with modern discoveries. In 2004, scientists filmed a living giant squid in its natural habitat for the first time. In 2012, high-definition footage captured one swimming calmly in the deep ocean, its massive body illuminated briefly before disappearing into darkness. Even now, much of its behavior remains unknown. And the giant squid is not alone. The colossal squid, even larger and heavier, inhabits Antarctic waters. It possesses swiveling hooks on its tentacles and a beak larger than that of the giant squid. Some estimates suggest individuals may weigh over 1,000 pounds. These are not delicate animals. They are apex predators of the abyss. Imagine encountering such a creature without context. Imagine the terror of seeing a living limb emerge from black water, writhing, gripping, pulling. The Kraken was not born from imagination, it was born from human vulnerability. The ocean covers more than 70% of Earth's surface, and we have explored less than a fraction of it. Even today, new deep-sea species are discovered regularly, creatures so alien they appear almost mythical. Bioluminescent predators. Transparent animals with no eyes. Beings that look like living nightmares. The Kraken reminds us of an uncomfortable truth: the world has never been as tame as we pretend it is. For ancient sailors, the Kraken was death with a name. A way to explain disappearances, storms, and the unexplainable violence of the sea. For us, it is a reminder that myths often stand on the edge of reality, shaped by fear, yes, but grounded in genuine encounters with the unknown. The Kraken still lives, not as a monster rising to attack ships, but as a symbol of how little we truly know about the depths below. Somewhere in the blackness, massive shapes still move unseen. Tentacles still coil. I still watch from the dark. The Basilisk, death in its gaze. In the shadowy corners of European folklore, no creature was more feared, or more fascinating, than the basilisk. Known as the king of serpents, the basilisk was said to have the power to kill with a single glance, breathe lethal poison, or even turn the very ground it touched into desolation. Medieval bestiaries describe it as a tiny serpent, sometimes only a few inches long, yet capable of leaving entire towns dead or blighted. Its name derives from the Greek basiliskos, meaning little king, a title that hints at its dominance over other serpents, both in legend and in the imaginations of those who feared it. The origins of the basilisk legend stretch back centuries, intertwining natural observation, superstition, and fear. In ancient Egypt, the pharaohs regarded serpents as symbols of danger and protection, and the deadly cobra, the uraeus, was a constant presence on royal crowns. Cobra's ability to spit venom into the eyes of a threat, causing temporary or permanent blindness, may have inspired the idea that the basilisk could kill with a glance. To an untrained observer, a spit of venom aimed at the eyes would appear as if death itself came from sight alone. Over time, as these tales spread across the Mediterranean and into Europe, they evolved into increasingly fantastical accounts of a creature whose gaze alone could decimate men, animals, and fields. Medieval scholars took the basilisk seriously. Pliny the Elder, the Roman naturalist, described it in his Natural History as so small that it could barely be seen, yet so lethal that it destroys all living things. Writers of the Middle Ages echoed this, claiming that the basilisk left a trail of dead animals wherever it slithered. It was, in essence, a creature of absolute, almost supernatural, danger, so feared that even the thought of encountering it could paralyze men with terror. Yet, behind the legend lies a far more plausible explanation. The basilisk was likely inspired by real venomous snakes, particularly cobras and vipers, whose behavior and appearance could easily give rise to myth. Cobras of the genus Naja can spit venom over distances of several feet, and the venom can cause severe damage to the eyes, sometimes resulting in permanent blindness. Vipers, such as the European Vipera amadites, carry highly toxic venom and a strikingly dramatic head shape, which could easily be interpreted as something otherworldly. Ancient travelers encountering these snakes in unfamiliar lands might have misjudged their size, power, and lethality, giving birth to a creature that could kill at a glance. Even more fascinating is how the basilisk's powers were amplified by cultural interpretation. Alchemy, magic, and early medicine all intersected in the ways people understood the natural world. The idea that a small, venomous snake could destroy crops, animals, or people resonated with societies for whom survival depended on careful observation of nature's hazards. A serpent that could poison the air or turn stones to dust was, in a sense, a symbolic representation of real dangers, plague, toxic plants, or disease transmitted by animal bites, that people could not otherwise explain. The basilisk also represents the intersection of fear and ingenuity in human storytelling. According to legend, only certain animals could kill it, a weasel or a rooster. The weasel was believed to be immune to poison, and the rooster, particularly its crowing at dawn, could repel evil. Some writers claimed that holding a mirror to the basilisk would turn its lethal gaze back upon itself, killing the creature. These tales hint at a psychological truth. Humans have long sought ways to make the world safe by inventing solutions to the unknowable or deadly. The basilisk, terrifying as it was, offered a way to conceptualize danger, and perhaps to control it. Across centuries, the basilisk appears in literature, art, and heraldry. In medieval manuscripts, it is depicted as a small serpent crowned with a regal crest, often surrounded by dead or dying animals. By the Renaissance, the creature had entered the imagination of alchemists, poets, and natural philosophers. Writers like Conrad Gessner attempted to catalogue it scientifically, blending folklore with observation. Though these efforts mixed myth and fact, they represent a remarkable attempt to reconcile human fear with empirical inquiry. Interestingly, the basilisk myth also traveled geographically and culturally, influencing tales far beyond Europe. In parts of the Middle East and North Africa, legends of venomous serpents with deadly capabilities echo many of the same themes. Similarly, in South and Southeast Asia, stories of snakes whose gaze or breath could harm humans suggest that the myth was not confined to a single culture but arose repeatedly wherever venomous snakes inspired awe and terror. What lessons does the basilisk leave for us today? First, it reminds us that myths are rarely pure invention. They are grounded in reality, filtered through fear, culture, and interpretation. Second, it demonstrates humanity's enduring fascination with lethal creatures, and our tendency to transform them into symbols of power, danger, and morality. Finally, it illustrates the deep connection between observation, imagination, and survival. The basilisk, in all its terror, is both a cautionary tale and a tribute to the natural world's capacity to inspire awe. Modern herpetologists, armed with scientific knowledge, might dismiss the basilisk as a fantastical exaggeration. Yet when we look closer, at spitting cobras, highly venomous vipers, and their real effects, we see that the myth is not entirely without foundation. People who had no access to microscopes, medical research, or evolutionary biology interpreted what they saw with the tools they had: observation, fear, and imagination. The basilisk, then, is a bridge between the ancient and modern world, a creature born of nature but immortalized by myth. Even today, the basilisk continues to capture the human imagination. It appears in literature, movies, and video games, a reminder that some myths, no matter how fantastical, are rooted in the tangible, terrifying truths of the natural world. And while science has demystified much of the basilisk's power, the creature still thrives in our collective psyche, as a symbol of danger, awe, and the thin line between myth and reality. The unicorn, not as gentle as you think. When most people imagine unicorns, they picture delicate, ethereal creatures, often white, gentle, and almost angelic, prancing through enchanted forests. They symbolize purity, innocence, and magic. But the story of the unicorn is far older, and far darker, than medieval fairy tales suggest. In its earliest forms, the unicorn was not gentle, and it was not necessarily a horse. Ancient texts describe a creature fierce, powerful, and untamable. Its horn was not merely a symbol of purity but a weapon of immense strength, capable of felling dangerous beasts and even humans if provoked. To understand the unicorn, we must step far back in time, to the vast Eurasian steppes, long before knights and castles, and examine what may have inspired the myths that survive today. The unicorn likely has its roots in prehistoric encounters with a massive, horned herbivore known as the elasmotherium. This enormous creature, sometimes called the Siberian unicorn, roamed the Eurasian plains from around 2 million years ago to as recently as 29,000 years ago. Unlike the delicate unicorns of European imagination, the Elasmotherium stood over 7 feet tall at the shoulder, weighed several tons, and bore a single, long, conical horn protruding from its forehead. Its horn, far larger than anything seen on a modern rhino, could have been up to 6 feet in length and was composed of solid keratin, the same material as human nails and hair. This was not a gentle herbivore for storybook meadows, it was a towering, armored giant that could charge with astonishing speed, trample predators, and defend itself against Ice Age carnivores. Fossils of Elasmotherium have been found across the vast stretches of Siberia, Kazakhstan, and parts of Eastern Europe. Its remains suggest a creature adapted to the open plains, able to graze on tough grasses, and capable of surviving extreme cold. For early humans encountering this animal, the sight of a massive, horned beast appearing suddenly on the horizon would have been both terrifying and awe-inspiring. It is easy to see how stories of a powerful, singular horned creature could have spread quickly, evolving over generations into the unicorn of legend. Historical texts also support the notion that unicorns were not always the gentle, mystical beings we think of today. Greek historians, such as Ctesias, wrote of a wild, horse-like creature in India with a single horn, describing it as swift and untamable, almost impossible to capture. The horn was said to be deadly to man and beast alike, a weapon as much as a symbol. In some accounts, the unicorn would charge, gore, or trample intruders, defending itself fiercely. It was a creature to be respected and feared, not a gentle companion of maidens in fairy tales. The medieval fascination with unicorns shifted their image, but it did not entirely erase their dangerous origin. In Europe, unicorns became associated with purity and were often depicted alongside virgin maidens, perhaps reflecting the idea that only the pure could approach or tame such a fearsome creature. Artists and writers overlooked the creature's ferocity, transforming its deadly horn into a healing tool capable of neutralizing poison and curing disease. The unicorn's dangerous potential was reinterpreted as moral virtue. It could only be approached by the virtuous, turning a real, formidable animal into a symbol of spiritual purity. Yet, evidence suggests that some unicorn lore may have preserved accurate memories of encounters with prehistoric megafauna. Even as late as the 1st millennium BCE, nomadic peoples of the Eurasian steppe likely encountered Elasmotherium or remembered stories of them passed down orally. Fossils, horn fragments, and tracks may have inspired myths across generations. Traders along the Silk Road reported strange, horned creatures in distant lands, which eventually filtered into Greek, Persian, and later European stories. That unicorn was never purely fantastical, it was history refracted through human imagination, distilled and moralized over time. One fascinating aspect of unicorns is their horn, often called the alicorn in medieval texts. Europeans believed it possessed magical and medicinal properties, capable of neutralizing poison, curing illness, and even detecting lies. Merchants sold objects purported to be unicorn horns, which were often the tusks of narwhals or narwhal-like sea creatures, showing how legend and commerce intertwined. These myths highlight humanity's enduring fascination with the unicorn. We feared its power, revered its purity, and commodified its legend, long after the original beast had disappeared from the steppes. But it is important to remember that the unicorn, in its earliest conception, was not tame, not magical, and not entirely benevolent. It was an apex herbivore of the Ice Age, a creature whose size, strength, and horn made it a force of nature. To ancient humans, it represented danger, majesty, and the mystery of the unknown world. Its modern, sanitized image is a product of centuries of storytelling, art, and moral allegory, yet the seed of truth lies beneath. When myths of unicorns describe untamable beasts, swift and powerful, they may be echoes of an Ice Age world that humans once shared with enormous horned creatures roaming the steppe. The story of the unicorn also teaches us something profound about myth itself. Legends often have roots in reality, even when transformed through culture, religion, or art. Fossils, fleeting encounters, and human imagination merge to create a creature that survived in memory far longer than the Elasmotherium itself. In essence, the unicorn is a bridge between paleontology and mythology, between the raw, dangerous animal world and the symbolic, moralized universe of human storytelling. It reminds us that the line between history and legend is often thinner than we think. The Manticore, Lion, Scorpion, Man. In the ancient deserts of Persia, travelers spoke in hushed tones of a creature so terrifying that even seasoned warriors would not dare approach. It had the body of a lion, the face of a man, and a tail tipped with venomous spines, capable of killing anyone with a single strike. This was the Manticore, a name derived from the old Persian Marchikvara, man-eater. Tales of the beast spread westward into Greece, then through Europe, morphing and evolving with every retelling. By the time of medieval bestiaries, the Manticore was portrayed as a monstrous predator lurking at the edges of human knowledge, exotic, deadly, and almost impossible to comprehend. But like many mythical creatures, the Manticore may have had a kernel of reality. Scholars suggest that ancient observers were not fabricating entirely, but rather interpreting the unfamiliar through the lens of terror and imagination. One leading theory points to tigers. The tiger's forward-facing eyes, human-like expressions, and immense hunting prowess could have easily been distorted into stories of a human-faced predator. Persian travelers venturing into dense forests or savannas, encountering tiger paw prints or remains, might have reported a lion-sized beast that stalked humans, its face anthropomorphized in the retelling to communicate cunning and intelligence, qualities humans instinctively recognize in themselves. The Manticore also reflects cultural anxieties about the unknown and the exotic. Persia, situated at the crossroads of East and West, was a land of trade, conquest, and myth-making. Merchants returning from India or Africa spoke of predators that could leap silently from shadows, with tails laced with poison. In a world without widespread literacy or scientific understanding, stories serve both as entertainment and caution. Beware the Manticore, warned the traveler's tale. It strikes where you least expect it. It was a story designed to protect humans from danger, while simultaneously inspiring awe. Ancient texts provide glimpses into how the Manticore was imagined. The Greek physician Ctesias, writing in the 5th century BCE, described a creature with a red body, 3 rows of teeth, and the intelligence to hunt humans as easily as cattle. Later Roman writers echoed and embellished these claims, integrating the beast into European bestiaries as a moral symbol, a warning against vice, greed, and curiosity. By the Middle Ages, illustrators depicted the Manticore with grotesque clarity, a leonine body covered in fur, a man-like face staring with calculating eyes, and a scorpion's tail raised high, ready to strike. What fascinates historians is how the Manticore blends real zoology with human imagination. Fossils may also have played a role. Bones of large cats, lions, or even saber-toothed predators unearthed in unfamiliar lands could have been misinterpreted as evidence of hybrid monsters. Traders often told stories to spice their journeys, exaggerating what they saw into tales that bordered on the supernatural. A skeleton slightly deformed or damaged could easily become a man-eating lion with a scorpion tail in the eyes of someone encountering it for the first time. Yet the Manticore also embodies a psychological truth. It represents humanity's fear of being hunted. Lions and tigers are apex predators. They dominate their environments with stealth, speed, and power. By assigning them a human face, storytellers emphasized the creature's cunning, suggesting that humans were vulnerable not only to brute force but to intelligence itself. The Manticore's scorpion tail further symbolized the unpredictability of nature. A strike could come from behind, above, or anywhere, emphasizing the constant vigilance required to survive in a dangerous world. Interestingly, some modern researchers link the Manticore myth to reports of sudden, mysterious deaths in remote regions. Rabid or aggressive animals may have attacked humans, and unexplained fatalities were rationalized through the lens of legend. A traveler returning from a faraway desert could describe a lion with a man's face as a shorthand for a particularly vicious predator, a story then magnified by successive retellings. In this way, myth functioned as an early form of epidemiology and survival guidance, a narrative warning against unfamiliar lands, strange creatures, and the limits of human knowledge. The Manticore also intersects with the broader mythological motif of hybrid creatures. In Persia, India, and Greece, chimeras, combinations of human and animal traits, were common in art and literature. These hybrids were more than mere monsters, they were symbolic constructs, blending human intelligence with the raw power of nature. The Manticore, in particular, serves as a dark mirror of humanity. It is human-like enough to terrify, yet beastly enough to remind us of the physical dangers that lurk beyond the safety of civilization. Even today, the Manticore continues to inspire. Its image appears in modern literature, fantasy films, and role-playing games, often as the ultimate predator, intelligent, merciless, and lethal. And while there is no evidence of an actual half-lion, half-man creature roaming deserts. Understanding its origins reminds us how humans interpret reality through fear, awe, and imagination. What we call myth often begins with observation, sometimes of real animals, sometimes of fossilized remains, and sometimes of the terrifying unknown. Ultimately, the Manticore teaches us that legend and reality are not opposites, but partners in storytelling. The myths of ancient Persia were shaped by encounters with real predators, cultural imagination, and the deep human need to explain the dangerous world beyond the campfire. Whether tiger, fossil, or traveler's exaggeration, the Manticore exists in a liminal space between fact and fiction, a testament to the power of the human mind to create stories that survive millennia. The lion, the scorpion, the man, they live on, not in deserts or forests, but in our collective consciousness, reminding us that every myth has roots, every legend a shadow of truth. And sometimes, when the wind howls across a remote desert or the sand shifts over ancient bones, it almost feels as if the Manticore is still out there, watching, waiting, a story yet unfinished. The Thunderbird, Sky God made flesh. Among the many creatures of Native American mythology, few command the imagination as vividly as the Thunderbird. Described as a colossal bird whose wings could generate thunder and whose eyes flashed lightning, the Thunderbird was more than a simple legend. It was a symbol of power, divine wrath, and cosmic order. For centuries, tales of the Thunderbird were passed down through oral traditions across the plains, Great Lakes, and Pacific Northwest. Its presence was often invoked to explain natural phenomena, storms that devastated crops, sudden gusts of wind, or inexplicable flashes of lightning that lit the night sky. But what if the Thunderbird was not entirely mythical? Modern science and paleontology offer compelling evidence that some of the stories surrounding these legendary sky gods may have been inspired by real creatures, specifically, the giant birds of the prehistoric Americas. Fossil records from the Pleistocene epoch, roughly 2.6 million to 11,700 years ago, reveal the existence of teratons, enormous birds of prey whose wingspans could exceed 20 feet. These birds, much larger than any modern eagle or condor, would have cast immense shadows over the ground, their wing beats producing a thunderous sound in flight. Imagine early humans witnessing such a creature gliding silently above a valley, then swooping down with talons capable of taking down large prey. It is no stretch to see how such sightings could evolve into stories of a divine, thunder-bringing being. Native oral histories, while varying among tribes, share remarkable similarities. The Ojibwe describe a thunderbird whose wings cause storms, while the Kwakwaka'wakwa recount it as a harbinger of both life and death, capable of punishing the wicked. In the Great Plains, the Lakota spoke of the thunderbird as a protector, battling underwater spirits and bringing rain to nourish crops. These accounts are not mere embellishments, they convey a deep cultural understanding of the forces of nature and, perhaps, glimpses of creatures long extinct. Archaeologists suggest that humans in North America overlapped with teratons during the late Pleistocene. It is plausible that encounters with these massive birds became woven into oral narratives, creating a mythology that combined observed reality with spiritual meaning. Just as fossilized dinosaur bones may have inspired dragon myths, teratons may have given rise to stories of thunderbirds whose wings shook the sky. Some theories even propose that the Thunderbird myth may reflect ecological memory. The sudden extinction of these massive birds, combined with their once fearsome presence, could have left a lasting impression on indigenous populations. Myths serve not only to explain the world but to encode knowledge, which areas are dangerous, how weather patterns behave, and how humans relate to the natural order. The Thunderbird could thus be seen as a symbolic memory of a time when the skies were literally ruled by predators. Beyond paleontology, the Thunderbird has maintained a powerful presence in art and ceremony. Totem poles carved by the Tlingit and Haida peoples often feature the bird, depicted with wings outstretched and eyes blazing with lightning. Ceremonial masks and regalia integrate feathers, paint, and symbolic imagery to represent its strength and authority. These artistic expressions preserve the grandeur of the Thunderbird in a way that transcends literal interpretation, turning what may have been a natural phenomenon into a spiritual icon. Interestingly, the myth of the Thunderbird also bears similarities to stories of giant birds in other parts of the world. In South America, the myth of the roc, a bird of colossal size said to prey on elephants, shares structural parallels, suggesting that humans across continents have consistently imagined or remembered massive avian predators. While the roc likely arose independently, the global fascination with enormous birds underscores the profound impact such creatures would have had on human imagination. Modern science has even documented accounts of extremely large birds that persist today, albeit less fantastical than the thunderbird. The Andean condor, with a wingspan approaching 10 feet, can produce a wing beat audible at a distance. Sightings of unusually large eagles or mysterious birds in remote regions occasionally rekindle legends of thunderbird-like creatures. While these modern birds are no match for the terror taunts of prehistory, their existence demonstrates how extraordinary avian encounters could inspire awe and fear, leaving a mark on cultural memory. The thunderbird also embodies the human need to interpret the natural world. Storms are unpredictable, lightning is dangerous, and winds can devastate settlements. By personifying these forces in the form of a bird of divine power, indigenous cultures created a framework to understand and respond to environmental challenges. In this sense, the thunderbird bridges the gap between the tangible and the spiritual, reflecting humanity's attempt to comprehend the sublime forces of the world. In contemporary times, the thunderbird continues to inspire curiosity. Cryptozoologists and enthusiasts speculate about hidden, surviving populations of giant birds, though no evidence has been found. Anthropologists study the myth to understand cultural transmission, ecological memory, and the interplay between observation and storytelling. The thunderbird is thus both a testament to prehistoric life and a mirror reflecting human imagination, science, and spirituality. Ultimately, the thunderbird reminds us that myths often have roots in reality. It is a creature that exists simultaneously in the skies of memory, in fossilized bones, and in the stories of those who first walked the American continents. It is both bird and deity, predator and protector, a sky god made flesh, whose wings once shook the world and whose legacy continues to echo in storms, stories, and art. The next time a lightning bolt splits the sky or a gust of wind rattles the trees, imagine the shadow of a giant bird gliding across the plains. The thunderbird may be gone from the physical world, but it remains alive in human history, proof that the boundary between myth and reality is often thinner than we imagine. The werewolf, the curse of the flesh. Among the most enduring and terrifying legends in human history is the tale of the werewolf, a human who transforms into a wolf, often during the full moon, and roams the night as a predator. Tales of these cursed beings span cultures and centuries, from the frozen forests of Scandinavia to the villages of medieval France and Germany. But the question remains, were these legends born purely from imagination, or was there a real kernel of truth behind the curse? To understand the werewolf, we must first examine the ancient origins of lycanthropy. The word itself comes from the Greek lykos, meaning wolf, and anthropos, meaning human. Greek and Roman writers mention men cursed by the gods or punished for moral transgressions, doomed to live as wolves for months at a time. In some tales, the transformation is voluntary, achieved through magic salves, enchanted belts, or secret rites. In others, it is a punishment inflicted by higher powers. In medieval Europe, werewolves were more than a myth, they were a social and judicial concern. Tales of villages attacked by wolf-like creatures, livestock found brutally slaughtered, and men accused of nocturnal killings fueled hysteria. The werewolf trials mirrored the witch trials of the era. Entire communities were gripped by fear, convinced that the devil had sent wolves disguised as neighbors to punish the innocent. In some regions, accused werewolves were executed by burning or hanging, a grim reminder that myth could carry very real consequences. Yet, as history intersects with medicine, a fascinating explanation emerges. Several medical and psychological conditions can account for the werewolf phenomenon. One of the most striking is hypertrichosis, a rare genetic disorder causing excessive hair growth across the body, including the face. In times before modern science, a person suffering from hypertrichosis would appear wolf-like, especially under poor lighting or during the night. Combine this appearance with erratic behavior or nocturnal activity, and it is easy to see how a community might believe the afflicted were cursed. Another contributor is rabies, a disease transmitted through animal bites, most often wolves or dogs in medieval Europe. Rabies causes aggression, foaming at the mouth, and a fear of water, creating a terrifyingly animalistic appearance. Outbreaks of rabies in villages could be misinterpreted as attacks by supernatural creatures. When these physical symptoms were compounded with superstition and fear, a rational explanation became a supernatural one. Anthropologists and historians also point to psychological disorders. Lycanthropy, in psychiatric terms, refers to a delusion in which a person believes they can transform into an animal. Documented cases of clinical lycanthropy describe individuals acting out wolf-like behaviors, sometimes violently. In cultures that already had stories of werewolves, these individuals were often taken as living proof of the curse. The folklore itself provides insight into the fears and morals of the societies that produced it. In Northern Europe, werewolves were often associated with transgression and punishment. Men and women who broke taboos, committed crimes, or were socially ostracized were believed to have been transformed. The wolf, as a predator that hunts in packs and strikes without warning, was the perfect symbol of both human fears and societal consequences. Yet the legend of the werewolf is not purely European. Across the world, we find strikingly similar myths. In Africa, the Nubu of the Congo is said to be a man who can transform into a lion-like beast. In South America, the Lobisomum, a man cursed on a full moon, shares nearly identical traits to the European werewolf. These global parallels suggest that humans everywhere have long been fascinated and terrified by the boundary between human and animal, projecting moral and existential fears onto creatures that are neither fully human nor fully beast. Even literature has cemented the werewolf in popular imagination. Stories like Marie de France's Bisclaveret, written in the 12th century, portray the werewolf as both victim and predator, a complex figure capable of loyalty and violence. Later, Gothic literature and 19th-century horror stories emphasized the horror of the transformation, linking the curse to uncontrollable desire, violence, and the darker aspects of human nature. Science and folklore intersect in the story of the wolves themselves. Medieval Europe faced periods of environmental and social stress, deforestation, famine, and the presence of wolves in nearby forests created a backdrop in which real wolves became agents of fear and inspiration. Attacks on livestock and occasional attacks on humans would have been terrifying events, reinforcing the mythology of human-wolf hybrids. In a world without television, newspapers, or social media, stories spread orally, gaining exaggerations with each telling. The werewolf legend also reflects humanity's struggle with instincts and morality. Wolves hunt in packs, showing a form of social cooperation humans understand but also fear. Wolves were symbols of wilderness, untamed energy, and danger, the very qualities that humans sought to domesticate in themselves and in their societies. By imagining a human cursed to become a wolf, people externalized the dangerous, wild side of humanity, warning against moral transgression while expressing a deep-seated fascination with the animal within. In modern times, the werewolf continues to captivate audiences. Movies, television shows, and literature have romanticized or dramatized the curse, portraying it as both terrifying and tragic. Yet, if we peel back the layers of fiction, we find that the werewolf is a mirror of real human experiences, illness, genetic variation, psychological disorders, and encounters with wild predators, all contributing to a legend that blurs the line between reality and myth. The werewolf legend is, in essence, a case study of how humans interpret the unknown. A person with a rare genetic condition becomes a monster. A rabid wolf in the forest becomes a cursed being. Fear becomes narrative, narrative becomes myth, and myth survives across centuries. By studying the historical and scientific origins of the werewolf, we not only understand a creature of legend but also gain insight into human psychology, societal fears, and the power of storytelling. Myth is history wearing a mask. For centuries, humans have peered into caves, sifted through sands, and braved oceans in search of the unknown. Every time they stumbled upon a skeleton, an enormous footprint, or a creature too strange to name, they did what humans have always done: they told a story. Out of fear, wonder, and curiosity, they created myths. Dragons, cyclopes, krakens, unicorns, these were not simply figments of imagination. They were truth seen through the lens of ancient understanding, reality refracted by the limits of knowledge and the power of narrative. Take dragons, for example. Across China, Europe, and the Middle East, dragons appear in nearly every culture's folklore. Scholars long assumed they were purely symbolic, reflections of human fear and ambition. But the dragon bones, found in Chinese apothecaries, often sold as medicine, were actually fossils of dinosaurs. Ancient people did not understand extinction, deep time, or evolution. They saw bones of creatures that could crush a house or pierce the sky and called them dragons. Their myths were an attempt to explain a world they could not yet comprehend scientifically. The Cyclops of Greek legend offers another vivid example. Homer's tales describe a one-eyed giant, fearsome yet tangible. Archaeology and paleontology reveal that the Greeks may have been seeing fossilized dwarf elephant skulls, whose single central nasal cavity resembled a giant eye socket. To a society without knowledge of extinct megafauna, this became the one-eyed titan of legend. Myth, in this sense, is simply ancient humans interpreting evidence with the tools they had, a fascinating fusion of observation and imagination. Even the griffin, a creature that seems to defy biology with its lion's body and eagle's head, may have arisen from real fossils in the Mongolian deserts. Nomadic peoples, encountering Protoceratops skeletons near gold deposits, described creatures with beaked faces and quadrupedal bodies. Traders and storytellers embellished the story as it traveled along the Silk Road, eventually becoming the legendary guardian of treasure. Fossil becomes myth, reality becomes wonder. The pattern repeats across continents. Sailors spoke of the Kraken, an enormous sea monster capable of swallowing entire ships. For centuries, these tales were dismissed as exaggerations, the product of drunken sailors' imaginations. Yet in the depths of the oceans, giant squids exceeding 40 feet exist. Early encounters with their massive tentacles, or carcasses washing ashore, would naturally inspire stories of a monster lurking beneath the waves. Here, myth preserves memory of encounters with nature's extremes, dramatized by human perception. Even creatures that never existed in a literal sense often have roots in reality. Unicorns, for example, are commonly pictured today as gentle, white-horned horses. But the earliest accounts depict them as wild, violent, and nearly unstoppable beasts. Their inspiration may have been the Elasmotherium, a prehistoric rhinoceros with a single massive horn. Fossils scattered across Eurasia, combined with travelers' tales, eventually evolved into the unicorn myth. Similarly, the Manticore, a lion with a human face and scorpion tail, could be traced back to encounters with tigers, whose predatory behavior and facial expressions struck awe and terror into ancient observers. Even humans themselves can become mythologized. The werewolf is not simply fantasy, it has roots in observable phenomena. Hypertrichosis, a genetic condition causing excessive hair growth, combined with rabies-induced aggression or the fear of animalistic behavior, could transform ordinary humans into terrifying beasts in the eyes of their communities. Disease, mutation, and psychological conditions fed into folklore, creating monsters out of flesh and circumstance. Here, myth preserves cultural memory of danger, encoding it as morality tales, warnings, and allegories. If we step back and examine these patterns, a remarkable truth emerges: myths are often history wearing a mask. They encode knowledge, observations, and memories that predate scientific methodology. Before fossils were studied systematically, before marine biology mapped the oceans, before medicine could explain disease, humans interpreted their world through narrative. Myth was a tool, a method, and an archive. Dragons, krakens, and cyclopes are not lies, they are fragments of truth filtered through fear, awe, and imagination. This perspective invites us to reconsider all myths, not just the ones explored in this series. Could there be other monsters yet to be fully explained? Could civilizations from the distant past have observed creatures now extinct, natural phenomena, or rare genetic mutations, encoding them into stories we still recite today? Every legend may hold a kernel of truth, waiting for the right lens to uncover it. Moreover, myths serve another purpose: they connect us emotionally to the world of our ancestors. A dragon in a cave, a giant skull in a valley, or a sea monster rising from a stormy ocean tells us how humans once interacted with the environment, how they feared the unknown, and how they sought to make sense of forces beyond their control. They remind us that curiosity, imagination, and the drive to understand are timeless human traits. So the next time someone says myths are just stories, remember this: many were born from real encounters, real bones, and real fear. Dragons rose from fossils, sea monsters from the depths, and giants from skulls too large to explain. Myth was humanity's first science, its earliest attempt to understand a dangerous and mysterious world. And even today, the Earth is still hiding secrets beneath our feet and oceans. What legends have we not yet uncovered? Thank you for watching, for exploring the past with us, and for keeping these ancient stories alive. Until next time, stay curious, and stay searching.